Good morning and welcome to the Lightcast studios for this JOLTS live analysis. JOLT standing for Job Openings Labor Turnover Survey and gives us one indication into the health of our economy. On this July 6, 2023, I'm your host, Christopher Laney, and I am joined by two fantastic Lightcast economists. We have senior labor economist Layla O'Kane and senior labor economist Dr. Rachel Cederberg. Rachel, Layla, welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to see you both. I'm going to start with you, Layla. Jolt just came out 30 minutes ago, so let's start with you. What's your initial reaction to this report?
Yeah, so it feels a little bit like deja vu. Openings ticked down to 9.8 million, which is lower than economists were expecting. I think predictions were around 9.9, and we're lower than that, which is great. And last month, they were at 10.1, so that's a pretty big decrease. But just a reminder to everyone that in March, they were at 9.6. So, we're kind of seeing them shuffle around. I think this is the direction we want to be going in, but it remains to be seen if this trend will continue.
Rachel, to you, what are your initial reaction to this report?
Absolutely. So for me, I like Layla was quite, pleasantly surprised to see, 9.8 million. We do want to see it slowly ticking down, and that would suggest that a soft landing is still a possibility in this labor market. And we need to remember that, pre-pandemic, we had far, far fewer job openings than we still do today.
Yeah, it's still massively high. So it's a good reminder that we still have so many job openings today. Layla, it feels like most analysts have been watching the quit rate specifically to see if that's an indication into the cooling of the market. What are you seeing in this report? Are we seeing that cooling happening? What happened with quit rates this month?
Yeah, so, in order to see a cooling with the quits rates, we would want to see that people are stopping quitting, right? So quits are going down. We would want to see that people are feeling more stable or feeling less like they could easily get a job somewhere else because there are so many job openings available. And actually in this report, we saw that quits were about the same overall, but they did tick slightly up. And so it's not the case across the whole economy that people aren't quitting their jobs. We are seeing that quits were up, particularly in healthcare and in construction and manufacturing. And I want to focus on healthcare here for a second because it was kind of interesting that openings were down in healthcare and layoffs were slightly up. And so that would kind of indicate to me that there were fewer jobs available and layoffs were happening, but quits were also up in healthcare. And so I think that there's just some fluctuation going on there where people are still sort of acclimatizing to potentially a new normal post-pandemic where the healthcare industry doesn't need quite as many people as it did for the last few years. And folks who are in nursing jobs or other jobs that were in really high demand are trying to figure out, exactly what kind of job they're looking for and kind of what stability they can find.
Rachel, last month, when we looked at the jobs report, frontline positions by far led the way in adding jobs to the economy in areas like hospitality, healthcare, transportation, warehousing, retail. Are you seeing higher levels of job openings in those frontline type of industries? Or were there any industries that kind of shocked you in today's report?
Sure. So leisure and hospitality is actually down this month in terms of job openings. And remember, this is data for May. That did kind of surprise me as we're, heading into those busy summer months of vacation, kids out of school, family travel, all that sort of thing. As Layla mentioned, healthcare and social assistance job openings were down. And that, went a bit against some of the anecdotal evidence I'm still hearing from those in the healthcare sector. So those did surprise me as well. As for transportation and warehousing, it's actually up over the past month and up over the 2022 value for May of 2022. And hires are up as well. So that one really surprised me because we're saying like, oh, we're cutting back on spending, and that would translate into warehouse and transportation. And it just didn't this month.
This question's for both of you. With layoffs practically unchanged in this report this year, a lot of individuals thought there was kind of this overcorrection that happened earlier this year that was making up for so many jobs, specifically in the tech sector, that were added during the pandemic. One, do you believe that overcorrection is kind of over now and we're kind of leveling off? Or do you think there's a possibility that we're going to still see layoffs occur in various industries? Layla, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's obviously a little bit complex, but we are seeing that there weren't, as you mentioned, a ton of layoffs across the whole economy. And in fact, we saw that layoffs actually nudged down in professional and business services, and openings were up in professional and business services. And that is an industry where some of those tech sector industry or tech sector companies live. I do think that you're totally right that there was sort of this correction based on overhiring during the pandemic, and I think we are seeing that smooth out. I do want to be clear that in the JOLTS report, we have never seen layoffs spread across the whole economy in the last 6 months. So as much as there has been a lot of media talk about the tech sector layoffs, I do think that those are kind of nudging down based on this report. And again, we're not seeing layoffs sort of ricochet into other corners of the economy, which is something that sort of we've all been worried about as we try to land this plane softly. So I think that's a good sign. I do think that it's possible that there will be more layoffs in the tech sector if there are companies that haven't sort of fully adjusted to the new normal and sort of work to correct that overhiring. And I do think because there's less capital available for companies, they are going to continue to adjust. But we are seeing that kind of slow down here, which is good news.
Yeah, Rachel, same question to you. Are you seeing anything maybe even related to the tech sector or just layoffs in general? What's your analysis on that?
So I think Layla said it perfectly with respect to the tech sector. I don't think it's a contagion. I think, we'll see a slow taper off of that sort of behavior as companies adjust. Everyone takes a little bit different time level to adjust to their new normal. One number that did surprise me a little bit today was the total separations in manufacturing. We're hearing a lot of, consumer spending is slowing down potentially because of, still higher inflation. And we did, as consumers, spend an exorbitant amount of money during the pandemic years and did so, wildly outside the range that we typically do. So I was surprised, but not surprised to see manufacturing having a decent amount of separations in that industry.
So we know
that.
Yeah,
and I just want to. Oh, sorry, Chris.
No, go ahead.
I just want to add, I totally agree with Rachel. I think the other thing that will be interesting is now that President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan has been shut down by the Supreme Court, that's going to be less money as well for some of those borrowers who are going to have to, not experience any loan forgiveness, first of all, potentially, and then also going to have to start repayment. And so I think there's sort of going to be that sort of slow contraction that might also add to some of this uncertainty in the manufacturing sector.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that was one of the things that we discussed coming out of 21-22, where there was a lot of opportunities within the economy where we didn't have to make house payments, or there were delays in rent payments and student loan payments. And a lot of consumers invested that money back into purchasing consumer goods. Sure. And so that's a really good point. We know that the Fed is watching today's report. We know that they have their eyes on tomorrow's jobs report. Based on what you see today, do you think this report is good news, bad news, or pretty much the same? And I'll start with you, Rachel.
So I think, this is good news. It's not great news, but it's good news. This is, the contraction in the slow contraction of the openings number that we wanted to see. As we said, layoffs are roughly unchanged. So it's just, comforting. It's still, as we said, far above pre-pandemic levels, but it's trending in the right direction.
Layla, how about you? What do you think? Good news, bad news, much of the same?
I've been touting cautious optimism for a while now, and I'm going to continue to do so. I think what we want is for openings to come down without layoffs ticking up, and that's exactly what we're seeing. I think if we continue to see this, the Fed will be very, very happy. That doesn't mean that, there's going to be an immediate reduction in rates or anything like that, and I wouldn't expect that based on this report at all. But I do think, as Rachel said, the trend sign is in the right direction.
Rachel, as you think about your final takeaways, not only what are you looking at in your final takeaways, but also what are your eyes looking at for tomorrow's jobs report?
So I think tomorrow I'm looking for more, reason to be cautiously optimistic, as Layla said. We don't want to see drastic shifts. We want to see gradual changes, and that is, I think, what the Fed would find most comforting. For me, this report is telling me that things are going in the right direction. We're not there. We have a long way to go, and things can change. But right now, it's looking pretty good. And I don't expect major changes in Fed policy, but I think things will remain fairly stable.
Leila, what are you looking at for tomorrow's jobs report? Any final takeaways in this report?
Yeah, I mean, I think a main final takeaway, right, is that we're still at 1.6 job openings per unemployed worker. This is still astronomically high. So again, trend line is in the right direction, but we want to see that kind of in a stable way continue to come down. And I'll be waiting to see what the June numbers for JOLTS look like next month, as well as the job openings numbers tomorrow, or the employment numbers tomorrow, to understand if we're going to keep seeing that tick down.
Leila, Rachel, thank you so much for today's analysis. We really appreciate that time. You can join us again tomorrow for the employment situation right here. We appreciate you watching. If you want more information, please visit lightcast.io. We'll see you tomorrow.